The first exercise we're going to look at is the deadlift. It's one of my most favorite exercises for mountain bikers because they activate the core really, really well. And also the position is similar to a lot of riding on mountain bike, or even if you are a gravel rider or a roadie, this is a really good exercise. One thing I have to mention though, I said today we are going to talk about the most efficient way of how to build muscle, and the deadlift is actually not the best way to build muscle. But why did I incorporate it? Well, the deadlift is a really good exercise to get really strong. But in order to get strong, you have to load up quite a lot of weight. It's a different kind of training. It's not muscle building, not hypertrophy. It's more neuromuscular stimulation, which in a training plan comes on a later stage. So if you're planning a training program, usually you start with muscle building, so hypertrophy, in the first few weeks. And that's why we use the deadlift, because in the hypertrophy phase or in the muscle building phase, we have to use a little bit less weight than when we want to get strong. Because when we want to get strong, we have to work with lower reps and higher weights, which in turn is a higher risk of injury as well. And we don't want to get injured, we want to get used to the deadlift, and therefore I start with the deadlift in the hypertrophy phase as well. Also, the deadlift doesn't use full range of motion in, well, basically almost all of the muscles. There are lots of muscles involved, and it's not very concentrated effort in a certain muscle group. So we have some hamstring, we have some quads, we have some glutes, we have some lower back, we have some upper back stabilizers, and it's not the most ideal exercise to build muscle, but it's a great It's a great exercise to get really strong, but before we have to get strong, we have to get used to the exercise, learn it really well, and that's why I incorporate it in the hypertrophy phase. That being said, let's get this started. So for the deadlift, we need a barbell and some weight plates. I'm going to show you how to deadlift first, and then we go into the details of the technique. All right, let's explain the details. First off, I would start with the bar on the floor. You can also rack it, but then you need a rack. And besides that, especially if you work with heavier weights, you have to unrack and you have to walk, which is not ideal. Especially later in the strength phase, where you have lots of weights, it's really not ideal. So start from the bottom. So before we start to grab the bar from the floor, it's really important that you are able to do the hip hinge. A hip hinge just means turning the upper body from the hip. So this should look like that. So we move the hip backwards, come forward with the upper body, but keep the spine in a neutral position. So I don't round, I don't arch too extremely. Everything comes from the hip. So I move the hip back, I come about here as much as I can forward until I feel the stretch in the hamstring, and then I come back up again. That is a really important movement. If you cannot do that, there is a great exercise to learn the hip hinge. Okay, so what you need is a stick. You can also use a broomstick, that would also work. Okay, so you put the stick behind the back, okay? And then you have 3 contact points. Let me adjust the head. One is the sacrum here, lower back. It should touch the stick all the time. Then the next one is here, where my thoracic spine is. And the third one is my head. So we have these 3 points, which should always be in touch with the stick, okay? One hand we put there where the lower back is, and the other hand is up on top of the head. And what we are doing now is exactly, we do the hip hinge. Okay, so we move the back forward, we move the we move the hip backwards as far as we can. We don't put in too much knee angle. We keep it quite straight, not completely straight, like a little knee bend. we move back the hip under control, and while I do this movement, I have to be in touch with these 3 points. As soon as you're out of touch, you should stop or readjust. That's the workout. Because with this stick, we make sure that our spine stays in a neutral position during the whole movement. That's the exercise, and this one you can do 15, 20 times. It's a great warm-up before a deadlift. So try this one. All right, so you have the bar on the floor. The grip usually is a bit wider than your knees and your hips because you have to pass them and you don't want to get into the middle of your knees with your hands. So that's why a little bit wider. All right, so the deadlift looks like this. Either I grip it in an overhand grip style, which usually you have to have quite a strong grip. If the weight gets really heavy and you fatigue your forearms, you either work with a cross grip technique. The cross grip technique works both ways. I would recommend that after every set you switch the grip. Okay, so one side, then the other side, and so on. What you can also use is a strap for around the ankle, which helps you hold on to the bar better and you don't fatigue as much. So I'm going to use the cross grip. Make sure the grip is more or less centered, left and right the same distance. So what I'm going to do is bring the bar close to me, go down with the hip, squeeze the bar, and now really important that I have pressure in the whole foot, maybe slightly on the heels. So I'm using the posterior chain more, so the chain in the back from the hamstring, glutes and back. So I shift my weights back, I start to pull, and once I'm over the knees, I actually push my hip inside, forward. Something important to say about the bar path and how you do it. So usually, as the bar travels down, you actually don't bend the knee as much until you are over the knees, and then you start bending the knees just a little bit. Okay, that would be a correct deadlift. And the same time when you go up, so you go up, you use the knees, you go over the knees, and then it's not much knee anymore, it's more hip. You bring the hip in, and once you're here, you're finished. And when you're finished, it's really important that you squeeze the glutes as hard as you can and keep an upright position. You don't want to round your back. That's not ideal. So you want to actually keep an arched back, so your lower back slightly arched, neutral position, strong in the core or in the trunk area. And you don't want to hang off your shoulders, so you want to bring the shoulder blades back together in a strong and tense position. What you also don't want to do is too much pressure on your front foot, so your heels lift off the ground. That usually means that your positioning is wrong, that your hip is not enough backwards, and that you have a lot of pressure on your knees, which is not ideal. So you want to go back with the hip so you have a neutral position. Remember the hip hinge, really important here. What about foot stands? Foot stands usually, if I'm wider than my shoulder, it's considered already a sumo deadlift, which is a different kind of lift. It's much more glute dominant. We don't want to do that. We don't need this sumo deadlift, especially for mountain bikers or cyclists in general. So I would keep it a little bit wider than the hips. Some people prefer narrower stands, which is okay as well. You should feel quite comfortable gripping the bar, so the wider you stand, the wider you have to grip as well, which is not comfortable either. Keep it pretty simple and straightforward, straight legs, a little bit wider than hips, that's fine already. Now with the deadlift, it's really important to progress slowly and that you always feel confident doing the lifts. So I would start really easy, maybe just with the bar, get used to the movement. Check yourself in a mirror, which is really helpful. Always stand sideways to the mirror so you have more control over your body. you can see how your lower back is working, if you're doing the hip hinge correctly, and then you can actually make some improvements. Remember, everything takes time, and you have to anyway think for a long period of time if you want to have fun on the bike, even in 10 years. So take it slow, take it not easy. Of course, over time, use enough weight. We'll come to that later. But yeah, progress slowly. Let's look at the next exercise, which is the bench press. It's a great exercise if you're planning to go to a club. I'm just joking. No, it's actually a great exercise for mountain bikers obviously because you have to, when you go downhill, you have a lot of eccentric forces coming through the bar, and you have to absorb them. It helps you pump through. It helps you actually when you fall, when you hit the shoulder, because it makes your shoulder much stronger. And in general, it's a really great upper body exercise. With the bench press, I usually say it's not just an upper body exercise. If you do it correctly, it's also a full body exercise. And I'm going to show you how to use your legs to get a stronger bench. Also, with the bench press, I'm training my chest, my shoulders, and if I do it correctly, I will also train my triceps, which in cycling is very important as well. Strong triceps will help you in pushing and in absorbing forces, and it will also prevent you from having bigger injuries around your elbows and shoulder area. All right, so let's look at the exercise. So when we set up for the bench press, it's really important that before you start, you make sure that the bar is on the level of your eyes. Because once you take out the weights, when you go down, you don't want the bar to interfere with the rack. And then the next thing, which seems trivial, but it's very important, is the grip. You want to have a really good and strong grip. Make sure it's centered, so I always use my thumb length on where the knurling starts. I put my thumb and then I grab the bar and keep it there, and the same on the other side. So thumb length, grab the bar, go around. And once I have the grip, I'm never gonna change it. And then from here, I set up my upper back first. So what I usually do is I will bring my shoulder blades back together. So it's really important that you are able to do this. So I bring the shoulder blades together, and while I move the bar, I will keep the shoulder and shoulder blades in the same position. So I'm not gonna do this, because this creates really a lot of instability, which we don't want. We want to be as stable as possible. And we want to keep the humerus, so the bone, in the middle of the shoulder joint. So therefore, we need to pull the shoulder blades back, stable position. And then from here, I start moving downwards, touch the chest, then come all the way up. It looks like this. Grip the bar, set up my shoulder blades, bring them together, and now I will actually engage my legs. So my legs shouldn't be just like this, all loose. I usually bring the legs as far back as possible without my heels being raised. So with me, it would be more or less like that. And then I press my heels into the ground. And when I do that, I will actually tighten my glutes, and that's what I want. So I want to have this ideal transfer of force from the legs into the upper body. And then I will also keep quite a tight core, a little arch in the back, that's fine. And once I'm set, I have quite some tension already in the body. And then I start to unrack the bar. I straighten it up, I straighten my arms out. And from here, I go down to the chest. And while I go down, I keep more or less a straight forearm. And my elbows come about in a 45-degree position. And this is where I'm going to use a lot of triceps as well. So I will go all the way down. Very important, I touch the chest, and then I go all the way up again. Really important here is when I go down, it means it's called the eccentric portion of the movement. I go slow. I go slowly, touch the chest, short pause, no, not resting on the chest, just a short pause, and then I come up quite in a normal tempo. Go slowly down, elbows 45 degrees, all the way up. So when you do the bench press, make sure your elbows are not 90 degrees, more like 45, so we're gonna use way more triceps than when we are out here. Also remember, it's a full body exercise. Really press your heels into the floor, transfer the force into the upper body. Also remember, shoulder blades back, so your shoulders are centered and you're stable in the upper body. Now, if you don't have a rack or a rig where you can rack the barbell, you can also do dumbbell bench press, which I'm going to show you now. The dumbbell bench press works very similar, but you don't have to rack the weight. Use the dumbbells and you can put them on the floor again. Again, I'm gonna take the dumbbells off the floor. Usually I put them on my legs, especially when the dumbbells are heavier. This is a great way to set up your position on the bench. So you roll over, put your legs on the ground, find your position on the bench, and then bring the arms up or bring your hands up. And then same thing again, so adjust your shoulder blades, bring your chest out, shoulder blades together, strong up upper back. Now, press the heels down into the floor, and then from here, I go all the way down, also 45 degree. I'm not using 0 degree, not 90 degree, it's about 45, and then I go deep into the stretch, as far back as I can, but controlled, keep the contraction for a little bit, and then come all the way up again. So slowly down, all the way down, full range of motion, really important here, and then all the way up. Once I'm finished, I bring my legs up, put it on the legs, and then put the dumbbells down. Now, the advantage of doing the dumbbell bench press is actually that you can use more range of motion. Because with the barbell, you will touch the bar on the chest, but technically maybe you could go down further. And with the dumbbell, you have the possibility to do so. So you create a bigger stretch, and when you create a bigger stretch, you actually increase the stimulus into the muscle, so you grow the muscles even better. Okay, the next one is called single leg squat, and it's actually one of my most favorite exercises for the lower body. It's a unilateral exercise, which means you're only going to use to work one leg. The other thing would be called bilateral exercise. So for example, the squat, which is also a great exercise, but it requires quite a lot of technique and mobility, and that's for another time, for another episode. But the single leg squat, great way to build muscle and a great exercise for cyclists. What you need is a bench and dumbbells if you want to use weights as well. So basically the exercise looks like this. I put my rear leg onto the bench, and then from here I go all the way down until I touch the floor with my rear leg, and then come all the way up again. Now here comes the technique. When I put my rear leg onto the bench, make sure that your ankle is free to move. What I mean by that is, if I go down like this, it will actually block the path of movement. So that's why I need to free my ankle so I can go all the way down. Also with the setup here, I want to make sure that I use the most range of motion as possible. So we can start like that. It also depends on the height of your bench. So the higher it is, the lower you have to go. It's also a question of flexibility as well, of course. Or the other thing is you adjust the height of your foot. So the higher your foot is, the more range of motion you have to use. Also foot placement. If I go on a wider stance, I usually work more on my glutes and hamstrings. And if I come closer to the body, I usually work more my quadriceps, more the frontal plane of my muscles. I like to keep it quite neutral, so somewhere in between, so I have a nice steady pressure over the whole foot, maybe slightly a little bit more towards the heels. And then what is really important is that I move my upper body towards my front leg, because I want my front leg to work, not my back leg. My back leg is only here to stabilize. Show it with the other leg. So center position, so I use more or less the same amount of hamstring, glutes and quads. I bring my upper body forward and then I start moving all the way up, all the way down. When I come down, I keep my upper body forward, but make sure the spine stays neutral. So all the way down, touch the floor, keep the upper body forward over the front leg. So I have all the pressure in my front leg and then come up again. Okay, all the way down, pressure is on the whole foot. My upper body is leaning over my front leg and then come up again. And when I use dumbbells, I just keep them on the side, so left and right. I go down and then I keep my upper body on the front leg. I can even move the dumbbells a little bit to the front, so I have really all the weight on the front leg and then come up again. And like I said in the beginning, range of motion is very important. It keeps your joints healthy, especially in the end range of motion, and it will increase hypertrophy even more if you use more range of motion. So how can you increase range of motion? Well, there is a pretty simple way to do that. You just start increasing the height of your front foot, and then when you do the exercise, you have to go even deeper. You have more range of motion, a bigger stretch in the muscle, and you will get bigger muscles more quickly. Okay, the next exercise is called the Barbell Row, and it's a really good exercise for a strong back. And this is how it goes. You grab the bar, so the wider you grip, the more lever you have, the harder it is to lift the weight. You grab onto the bar. I'm always going like a little bit wider than shoulder. And now comes the most important part. So you have to move your upper body as much forward as possible, but without rounding your back. So that would be not good, okay? So we have to keep the lower back arched, chest out, a strong position in the shoulders. So basically this movement is actually a hip hinge, okay? The same hip hinge as you do in the deadlift. So ideally, your upper body is parallel to the floor if your flexibility allows it. From here, we have the biggest lever and the most amount of stress in the lats. Okay, so from here, we pull back the elbows and really squeeze at the end. So when we're here with the bar, we go as far back as possible, ideally around the belly button area. So the barbell touches around the belly button. A bit faster up, slowly down. And really let go of the shoulder as well, but controlled. And then you pull back the shoulders, you row until the belly button, and then come back down again. When you lean forward, you have to stabilize the core really well. And that's why it's a great exercise for cyclists as well, to train the trunk area, okay? And usually it's like that. The more tired you get, the likelihood of coming up with the upper body is bigger, which means you're cheating, okay? So if you can't maintain this position parallel to the floor all the time, it means you have to go down with the weights or stop the repetitions, okay? Okay, so in case you don't have a barbell, or if you cannot hold this position due to lack of flexibility, if you can't maintain the upper body parallel to the floor, this exercise, the chest supported dumbbell row, is a great alternative as well. So this exercise works like that. You grab the dumbbells and then you keep the arms completely straight. You actually go down with the shoulders as well. And then first you pull the shoulders back and then you start moving, same as with the barbell row. You pull the elbows as far back as possible and you can keep the arms in a neutral grip position. So this would be underhand, overhand, neutral. You keep it neutral and then you pull back as far as you can. And also here the forearm stays more or less vertical. So I'm not up here, I'm also not down here. I'm actually letting my forearm being vertical. So I come up, I squeeze, I hold the position a little bit longer, and then I come down again. And now you can see that when I go up, I actually have more range of motion instead of the barbell, because with the barbell you're limited here. You touch the stomach and then you cannot go further back. So this has an advantage. With the dumbbells you can go even further, so you can go really far back. And the one little tip, if you have 2 benches or a box, set up the bench like this, if you can. Like this. And then it's the same with the barbell rows, you can lean more forward. You're almost parallel to the floor in this case. And then when you grab the dumbbells, you have optimized the angle. You have the biggest lever. And then from here you do the same workout. Come all the way up and all the way down. So with this setup, we have a better angle and therefore create more stimulus in the lats and create better results.